This is the Recover with God podcast, where we talk about recovery from eating disorders, disordered eating, diet culture, body image, weight struggles, overexercising, and anything related to food and body that keeps you feeling trapped. The enemy wants to distract us with these struggles, and that is why recovery with God is so important. This podcast will point you to God and the hope and freedom we have through Jesus, whether you're here for your own recovery or you want to help someone you know. So let's dive in and hear what God has to say through this episode of the Recover with God podcast. Hi, Jayme here, host of the Recover with God podcast. I don't know what led you to push play on this episode, but I have a feeling God was involved. He knows what you need to hear, and I am believing that something in this episode will resonate with you. My guest today is Mary Lauren Shelton Vise, a registered dietitian who specializes in eating disorders for athletes, as well as sports nutrition, disordered eating, intuitive eating, and more. If you're an athlete or coach, or even the parent of an athlete, this episode is for you. But even if you don't fall into any of those groups, keep listening. We also talk about perfectionism, being a high performer or overachiever, our identity in Christ, and the other I word, idolatry. Like I said, I'm confident that something in this episode will speak to you, and I'm praying God will speak to you through it. So here we go. Get ready to meet Mary Lauren. Hey, Mary Lauren, thank you so much for saying yes to being here. I'm really excited to dive into the topic of athletes and eating disorders and just a whole lot more that we're going to talk about. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be able to connect with you more and talk about a subject that's so near and dear to my heart.
I can tell that it is, and I know it's just going to help a lot of people. I've really been praying about this conversation. So let's let's dive in with the first question I ask all of my guests about zeal. Zeal is my favorite word, and my definition is living with a passionate and persistent pursuit of a purpose. So, Mary Lauren, what does living with zeal look like in your life right now?
Absolutely. Zeal to me is showing up with heart. I think it's
Mm,
so important that everything that we do is showing up with our heart, showing up, living within our values. And to me, some of my strongest values are compassion and adventure. And so, with everything I do, whether it's my work life, my personal life, I really try to bring compassion into that. I try to meet people where they are. I want to be able to understand kind of how people view the world and their day-to-day lives. And then also adventure to me also means like staying open to growth, to change, which can be really uncomfortable and challenging, and to just really be able to accept what God is unfolding both in me and then through me, whether it's through my work or through my personal life, my day-to-day connections, because those connections are so powerful and meaningful. And so being able to just show up with heart and to be present, I think it's just so important.
I love that. Show up with heart. That's definitely a new one. This question always brings up so many unique answers, and I love that. And I adventure is very near and dear to my so I can resonate with that. But I like that. I like being open and kind of just there's multifaceted, right? So it's a little bit of everything. Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. I like it. Thank you. Um, and now I would like to hear more about you. Like to open it up for you to share your story, whatever God has placed on your heart.
Thank you for allowing this space to share. I'm excited to be here, and I know everybody has different journeys through faith and their work and personal lives. So it's
Mm,
amazing to be able to hear different messages. I am a registered dietitian. I run a private practice here in Dallas, and also virtually, where we focus on eating disorders and sports, as well as women's health issues. And really, my main mission is to help individuals reconnect with their bodies and food, and exercise or movement. And through that, I really do enjoy being able to incorporate my own faith. And if someone may not follow the same Christian philosophies that I do. That is completely okay. I do, though, love to be able to incorporate spirituality and faith of any sort into our work because I believe that really brings us connection and purpose and power. And so from a young age, I grew up as a competitive equestrian, so that's where I really
Okay.
got a privilege of working with sports dietitians. I fell absolutely in love with athletics, and also saw that nutrition is a huge piece of our performance and our well-being. It's not just food is life or for life; it's so much more. And so in high school, I actually started my first catering company,
Oh,
or my
wow.
first company. It was called Pride Fit Cafe. It was really fun.
Amazing.
And with that, it was for equestrians. And so it catered nutritious meals to those events as an option outside of concession stand food,
Wow. Yeah.
which really allowed me to learn about nutrition. Um, and ignorantly, as my high school self, I thought, well, a lot of my competitors aren't eating or they're getting really injured. And it didn't seem to be from accident injury, it was just like overuse injury. And so through that, I was like, well, I'm going to bring nutritious meals to these shows and it's going to fix this issue.
Yeah.
At that point, I really learned that there is a very strong correlation between disordered eating and eating disorders, or even low energy availability in reds in sports. So, underfueling, which can lead to injuries and mental health concerns. And so, that's really in high school where my passion like took off for nutrition and the athletes and eating disorders, like really helping an athlete to learn, okay, there's so much more to performance than just training. We need to be whole athletes. And so in college, I was attended University of Kentucky in Lexington, and
Okay.
that's where I focused all of my studies on eating disorders and sports. I really felt called to this population because it's a group that feel like suffers in silence so
Mhm.
often because of so many perfectionistic traits, so many people pleasing traits, and that high drive for perfection and accomplishments. And so I really wanted to be a voice for those athletes. And so a lot of my studies went towards that. After college, I worked in different mental health and eating disorder spaces. And then in 2018, I started my practice, being able to really specialize more so in the eating disorders and sports.
Wow. I had no idea about your equestrian background, and I think it's amazing to see how God gives us those steps in life of, you were, in this space yourself, and you had the catering business, and that allowed you to see some of the issues that were kind of underlying with certain athletes and just how that needs to be addressed, and so just giving you that space to sort of discover it, and even though you thought you were gonna fix the problem right away, but kind of just learning, like, what does it really take, and what does that look like, and the fact that you have been an athlete yourself, and so kind of just coming to help people from the idea that you do understand, athletics, you understand sports, and that perfectionist drive definitely to wanna succeed at any cost for some people, I can imagine, like, whatever it takes and whatever that looks like, but I'm so glad that you're in this space and that you are helping athletes and, people in sports to really navigate what this looks like for them, whether it is disordered eating or an eating disorder, as you said, like they do have correlation and people fall at different points on that spectrum. And so being able to help them wherever they are, whatever that looks like for them. So can you share more about like working with athletes and sort of the unique challenges that they might face when it comes to an eating disorder or like body struggles with their performance?
Absolutely. So many of our athletes, like I said, struggle in silence. And it's so unfortunate because maybe our coaches and trainers may not have the education in
True.
sports, or our athletes, what I constantly am hearing is I'm not sick enough. And so they think, okay, well, what I'm doing is normalized in my sport. Like as a female athlete, maybe I don't have a menstrual cycle and that's normal. Or maybe it's normal to not take an off day or normal to miss meals during the day. And unfortunately, so often our athletes are pushed past their limits and they're not really taking care of themselves. And so that's really where I see a lot of our athletes struggle to be able to say, okay, I have to be a human first and an athlete second. And even before that, I need to be a child of God first and serve the Lord. And then I
Yeah.
can be able to achieve so much more. And our culture, unfortunately, in athletics and even outside of athletics, really put so much focus on like what we're accomplishing day to day, or like what is the status we're achieving, or what events are we winning, versus like who we are in our heart and who we are in Christ. And so I see a lot of our athletes struggle with that. Like their identity is so wrapped up in being an athlete. And like I mentioned, those perfectionistic, the people pleasing, the high achieving, can be really challenging because they're always striving for more. They're striving to be perfect. There's judgment of maybe I'm not tough enough or I'm not doing enough. It's just hard to find those boundaries. And they're always pressured to be at their best. They can't have off days, or they sometimes don't feel they can have off days. And if maybe they're not performing at the best, that may impact the way they feel about their worth or their bodies. And so um, I do see a lot of our clients and athletes struggling with like, who am I outside of sport and what is my worth outside of sport?
Yeah. Do you think have you seen a lot of pressure, like talking about that pressure to have a very specific body type as an athlete? Is that something too that
Absolutely, especially depending on the different sports as well. So if it's more of an aesthetic sport, that may depend on, okay, we actually do need to have a certain body type or weight or physique. There can definitely be a strong emphasis on body image. We also see if we're needing to be strong and very muscular, that may be another body goal that we're aiming for. And there's so many um, of ways to compare. Athletes may say, "Oh, I don't have this athlete body." I have some of my most elite athletes that are so competitive. And they're like, "I don't have an athlete's body." I'm like, "What is an athlete's body? A body
Yeah.
is an athlete's body is a body that does the sport, like you're doing
Mhm.
it."
Yeah.
But there's so much drive for I need to have this specific body image,
Mhm.
and that's really challenging because a lot of times our body isn't capable of maybe whatever that goal is or what we see on
Yeah.
social.
Yeah, God made us all look different, and, no, I just my heart kind of goes out to, anyone who might be striving to really change their body, to look a certain way for a certain sport, or to think that this is what's gonna, give me a better performance, and even thinking about I know you mentioned not taking a day off, and obviously, like, as I'm sure you tell your clients, and we know, like, for our muscles to grow and to, not pull a muscle or not, do any damage, like, we do need rest from exercise, and obviously training is still it's a exercise. So even if someone's listening now and you're not an athlete, if you're exercising every single day, very, like, hard, high intervals or, things like that, I can imagine, like, that's not ideal either for your body.
Absolutely. I think also with that, like we need to find a balance between like what is intense physical activity and then
Mm,
what is movement. Movement can be
mm,
something as gentle as stretching or meditation or a walk. It's really just allowing you to connect with your body and be gentle with it and nurturing it.
mhm.
And so often our athletes, since they are so elite and they can run and do all of these things, then doing something that may seem as simple to them as stretching or walking is very challenging to also view that as something that is beneficial for the body, whereas other people may not have the ability or the privilege to be able to do those gentle forms of movement. And so helping to recalibrate those thoughts.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely important to think, this doesn't really count, right? If it as moving because it's not as intense as they're used to, and I'm sure that maybe some people think too, like, "Oh, if I skip a day, then it's gonna hurt their overall performance." So, no, those are probably really hard things to address with people, but thank you for sharing a little more deeply about what that looks like and kind of the truth behind it as well. To get behind some of those lies that we tend to believe in our minds, and how we really need to be open to the truth. And on that topic of truth, I would like to hear more about kind of how have you seen faith and having a relationship with God with your clients help them overcome this eating disorder behavior, disordered eating, just kind of these thoughts of even perfection and all of that?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned, so often our athletes do identify as an athlete. That is their worth, that is their value, that's their identity. And so, so often we will see an athlete get injured and pulled from their sport completely, which is so challenging to navigate. Or maybe we are going from high school to college and we no longer compete in collegiate athletics or collegiate to professional or retiring after college. And so there are really big transitions. And so I think so often it's important to help our athletes see their worth outside of the sport because they are so much more than that. And so I think faith plays a monumental role in determining who they are and helps them in recovery, especially if we're focusing on eating disorder recovery or deeply rooted insecurities that may impact our body image or relationships with loved ones. Um, I think having a relationship with Christ really allows us to feel loved unconditionally. Maybe we aren't able to eat based on what our eating disorder tells us, or maybe we don't have that perfect ideal body that we are idolizing, or we're not achieving what we want in sport. But being able to know, like, I am a child of God, I am loved by Him, I think allows us to feel so loved. And it breaks that perfectionistic cycle and self judgment that keeps us in this perpetual cycle of I'm not enough. I think it also allows us to have faith to face our fears. And it gives us so much strength in that because, again, if we're scared of messing up, it's going to hold us back from doing different things or connecting with other people or taking the leap of challenging the eating disorder when that may feel easy.
I'm glad you brought up the fear aspect. I am a recovering perfectionist, I would say, and something I didn't realize until I was an adult is that perfection is really more based on fear than anything else because you are afraid to fail. And so, kind of just once I recognized that, it changed my whole perspective on perfection. Because there was a time, I will admit, that I thought perfectionism was a good trait, that I was like, I'm gonna be the best or I'm gonna do this perfectly and thinking that it was a huge perk, as part of my personality, and I think there are ways of, utilizing perfection in a way that is healthy or, you wanna strive to, like, put your best, effort into something, especially, like, on the job or as an athlete, but at the same time, not letting it get too overbalanced where you're just so focused on that you can't see anything else. And so, anyway, yeah, fear it's crazy how fear really is part of that story and just not wanting to fail. And so yeah, thank you for that. And also the identity piece. And even thinking about it as an idol, I think that's really important. I want to go back and note that because idolatry can appear in so many different ways in our lives, ways we might not even realize. And anything that we really put before God, is an idol, and that could be your sport or your body or just anything that you're really striving for that you're so much more focused on than your relationship with God. So, yeah, I think that's really important to note, like, what idolatry can really look like. I think, I don't know, growing up, I don't know about you, but I kind of always thought of idolatry when they talked about it in the Bible as like, "Oh, what? Worship a golden calf?" Or, I don't have this idol or this thing that you're actually praying to, but when it comes right down to it, it's really just like the thing that you put above God. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think also so often, I know for me specifically, I did grow up in the church. And so I was very blessed. My family was very integrated in the church. That was something that I was raised in, and it's deeply personal to me. And I think so often our athletes believe that faith is like, I need to show up to church or I need to be in church to be a Christian. And that's hard when they're traveling all the time. And so
True.
being able to help them understand like faith can go with you anywhere. You can still practice, no matter where you are. We can do so many different things to allow ourselves to remain connected with the Lord. And it's a personal relationship. It doesn't mean you have
Yes.
to show up in a building to be a Christian.
Absolutely. And I hope too that, for certain athletes, depending on, who's on your team, that, finding other athletes who are also walking the same faith as you, that maybe you can stay in community with when you're not able to go to church, like finding that community, I think is so important. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I grew up as a Christian as well, and kind of breaking that down to where yes, it is great to be part of a church family and have that community and have it regularly as often as you can, but there are times when you are traveling, it could be for a sport, it could be for a vacation, and you're just really not able to go, and that doesn't mean that, you're distant from God, and thank goodness that there are so many more churches now that even have online services, and not that that's an excuse to never go when you can, but it's great when you're just not able to just be able to still plug in and having, like, online Bible studies and just so many different resources that we can tap into, even just ebooks since you're traveling, you're not able to like bring a physical book with you, like, reading books on Kindle or something like that, like the Bible especially, and like the Bible app is just a great alternative. So I think that that's great to know as well because I feel like yeah, maybe some people might be feeling guilt over that they're just not able to always attend physically, but God is yeah, he's omnipresent with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with talking about faith, I would love to hear more about some faith-based practices that you use with athletes who are clients, or maybe even non-athlete clients as well.
Absolutely. What we see first and foremost is prayer. I
Mm,
think that is so important for us to be able to ask for guidance, to give us strength and peace, and just choose the hard options. It's
mm,
really hard to choose something that may not be mainstream, or it's really hard to choose something that may not be our automatic go to. And so being able to surrender that and ask God for guidance and strength and peace is so important. Um, it, I think, allows us also to just like recenter if we're praying and to recenter our mind to make sure that our decisions and our actions are aligned with our values and our faith. Um, and it gives us purpose, I think, being able to say, okay, whatever I'm going through right now, like there is a purpose for this, there is a plan. And so I think prayer is so important. And that can be done anywhere, at any time, it can be any
mhm,
duration. So that's such a powerful tool. Scripture meditation is another one we use frequently. So, especially maybe finding Bible verses that really allow us to feel um, like we align or they align with our worth, or they allow us to find identity and healing. They can be so encouraging. And so a lot of our clients and even myself like to find verses and just say like, okay, how am I going to marinate on this verse today, and how am I going to find ways to incorporate this lesson into my life? Or maybe I'm struggling with my self-worth and my identity today, and I'm really going to root in knowing that my worth is being a child of God and I am loved. And, or if it's related to body image, maybe finding a verse that's related to that,
mm,
or going through trials and tribulations. And so the verses are endless. And I
yes.
think it allows us to really find something that gives us peace and motivation for a day. And then one of my favorites, whether we are a Christian or not, is practicing gratitude. I cannot speak highly enough of practicing gratitude. It's so simple and profound. It really shifts our focus from like what is missing and what is imperfect to what's good and what's present. And I think that alone just gives us so much joy to be able to say, okay, I can be present. Life is good. I have everything that I need around me. And it allows us to celebrate daily victories,
Mm,
allows us to keep seeing that there's hope. especially on our hard days or if we're in recovery and we're challenged by different decisions.
Yeah, I love that you brought up just those um, daily celebrations, daily things, because I think as people go through recovery, it is a process and it can feel discouraging sometimes when it's not going as quickly as maybe you hoped it would, or as you might feel pressured for it to go a little faster. And taking the time to actually celebrate those wins, even if it feels really small, even if the step feels like, "Did that really change much?" But it is, it's a step forward, and making sure that you acknowledge those is so important to not feel like still a failure in recovery. I think at least I'm speaking from personal experience, but I know that that's very important, and so I love that, the idea of incorporating gratitude because there are even in the midst of a challenging situation and like a hard recovery, there are still things that are good in life and that we can be grateful for and be thankful for and know that God is still with us in the hard, right? Because that's
Absolutely.
it's important. He doesn't leave. He doesn't leave when it's hard, and we need him. Well, we need him all the time for every situation, but when it's hard, that's when I think I don't know. I think there was a time for me when I felt like God's not gonna help me now because I'm in this situation where I'm habitually sinning, basically, and I have this, my body is an idol ahead of God right now, and then realizing, no, like, He wants to be part of this, even in the middle, in the messy part, so, um, yeah, I think that's great, and even what you said, just kind of all 3 tied together, but just the prayer and going back to gratitude and how that sort of stops the mind spiral that you can get into sometimes where you're just it's hard to get out of that, but then, like, focusing on not on yourself and not on your thoughts, but back to God, it really makes all the difference.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely is. And you mentioning like the messy, he's there in the messy, like to me, and you asked about like the perfectionism. I too am a recovering perfectionist. And so I think so many of us are, right? And
Mhm.
there's so much security or what we think is security in perfectionism. And it really doesn't allow us to connect with people. It actually fractures relationships. And to me, being a perfectionist is telling God, I don't need you, I've got this. It's saying like I've got this. Instead of being able to surrender and say, like, I need you, I need help, I don't have this. And to me, like that is the most vulnerable we can be is to let our walls down and to say, like, I don't have this, I need you. And that is where we can connect to other people. That's where we find community. And I think that's where the real growth happens.
Oh, yes, yes, that's good because I feel like you said it earlier about athletes and how it's kind of this silent struggle, and I think that the enemy wants us to be silent about it because he wants us to think we're the only one, and when you really break it down, I mean, you and I were just saying, like, we are both recovering perfectionists, like, how many other people out there are maybe struggling with the same thing you're struggling with, and you think you believe the lie that you're the only one, and it's just not true, and when we do start to talk about it and we obviously invite God into the mess, but invite even other people that we might trust in our lives and realize, "Oh, wait, really? Like you're struggling with that? So am I." And having those conversations and feeling less alone and then knowing that you have not only God, but you have other people who might support you and maybe help you be accountable and help each other be accountable for that growth. And so it's just that's how God designed it. And obviously the enemy does not want that to happen, but even having these conversations, even, I hope someone listening right now, like, might, once they're done listening to this episode, just to, like, go back and, like, who could I maybe, like, talk to about something that I'm going through and, invite them in and just be a little vulnerable in that and not be afraid and just, pray and see what happens. So, yeah, that's a great point to add because we are all going through something and we are not alone. You're not the only one who's ever gone through the thing you're going
Oh,
through and the challenge that you're facing, whether that is recovery or just something else with your walk with the Lord, or it could really be anything, honestly. So, um, well, we were talking about perfectionism, so I do want to dive into this topic kind of a little bit more. And I know you've touched on some of these things, but I wanted to see if you wanted to add anything about how can perfectionism really hinder the recovery process if we don't deal with it?
God. I think we've touched on a lot of it. First and foremost, you're not alone. Like, there you're not alone. And I think that, again, going back to the control piece, it comes up all the time. It gives us what we think is a false sense of control. But unfortunately, perfectionism, there is no limit. Like, you are never going to be perfect enough. We can never achieve something perfect enough. And so it always leaves us feeling unfulfilled, at least for me. I if I am leaning into my perfectionism, it's never enough. And I think that goes for our athletes, it goes for recovery, it goes for a homework assignment, it could be in our marriage, it can be in anything, like just not feeling enough. And that is going to trickle into so much of our life and how we feel. And so um I think it's scary to let go of perfectionism and to do something wrong. It's terrifying, and also when we are able to surrender that and see, okay, maybe there's actually another way to do this, and maybe I will feel very fulfilled in this other option, or maybe asking for support, which is critical in recovery in life. Asking for support is stepping down for that from that perfectionism and sense of control, and just allowing us to say like, okay, I need support here. One of my favorite questions on the perfectionism is I always will ask my athletes or my clients, like, we're doing really well right now, but what if we could be even better? And I think that that question, like, yes, we can be better, like a check mark, yes, but what if we can do it without having to give 150%? What if we're working far harder than we're getting in return? And by letting go of some of that perfectionism, we're able to find that.
That's for someone who like perfectionism or like overachievers, high achievers, that's a huge question. I've never heard it put that way before, but thinking almost like how can you do less but still get like a true benefit, right? 'Cause
Yes.
yes, as a, high achievers, I feel like there's like more is gonna also exponentially grow and equal more results, but that's not always the case, and you just really end up burnt out. And I don't know, I'm sure you do you see a lot of like athlete burnout as well?
All the time. We also see our athletes go from being super competitive and then maybe underfueling or living in their eating disorder and then getting injured and then maybe being out of sport for a little bit. And that causes a lot of turmoil because of identity. There may be some body changes during that time. So it's something that we see frequently.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And kind of going back to of the kind of the high achieving or the overachiever mindset with perfectionism. Um, I love what you mentioned about kind of like it will never be enough because I think that, anyone who's really goal driven or goal oriented, you have this idea in your head, well, if I can just get here, I will feel fulfilled in life. I will feel satisfied. I have like achieved the ultimate. But when you get there, you realize no, now there's another mountain that I have to climb. There's another goal that I have yet to achieve or it's even if you like feel, really good in the moment, it doesn't last, right? Like there's always going to be that craving for more and we know that only Jesus can fill that, right? But it's um I can only imagine you probably see that a lot too of like just kind of like it's almost a disappointment I think when you've like achieved something and you get there and you're like oh, that's it? Or, "Oh, wait, but so and so is doing more than this, and so now I've gotta move the bar," and it's like, it's never enough. It's whether it's comparison with other people or even just the pressure that we put on ourselves, like, it just never feels like enough, and, I don't know if you have any more to say kind of on that topic or how you address that with people, but, this made me think of that when you said it.
Absolutely. I just, yeah, I think perfectionism really creates a disconnect. And that's another really big piece. And I know we've mentioned it, but
Yeah.
perfection isn't relatable. And a lot of times we use it to shield ourselves, but
Mm.
I, it's impossible to relate to perfectionism. It is in those imperfect, relatable moments that we are able to build community.
Yeah, and I love that God puts so many examples in the Bible of very imperfect people that
Mhm.
he still uses and he uses in a way that's bringing him glory and you would maybe not expect it. Like, whether that's choosing, I just read through The book First and Second Samuel, and King David, he was the youngest of the brothers in his family. He was the least that they had expected would ever be king, and yet that's who God chose. And if you look at the lineage of Jesus, even the people in his generational line, like they were not necessarily people that you would think would be perfect or as someone might say deserving of it, but with like that's who God chose. And I really do. I love that he can use our weaknesses for his glory. Makes me think of the verse in I always forget, First or Second Corinthians, where it's talking about like, we have this treasure, or God puts his gospel in us and we are like jars of clay. We are fragile and broken, and he can still use us. So I think, yeah, just kind of for me as a recovering perfectionist, that is always such a good reminder, just looking at those examples in the Bible and seeing how God didn't only put perfect people, perfect stories, in there for us. And that's huge. Like that's really what we need to cling to. And I love, going back to what you said about like picking out those Bible verses. Well, maybe it could even be like who's a Bible character, someone in the Bible that you could look up to as, wow, they weren't perfect, but they just kept going and they were willing to be used even in their weakness.
So we learn so much though too, like through a recovery journey. It may not be an ideal situation and it may be really challenging. Um, and also it allows us so much growth. And that's something we constantly hear is, "Wow, had I not gone through recovery, maybe I would have still been leaning into perfectionism, or I still would have been walking kind of in line with faith, but not fully integrated with that." And so often our clients and even myself, right, through my work, I'm able to feel so much closer to Christ because of asking for assistance and
Mhm.
support.
Yeah, letting go of that perfection. It's scary, but it also that is the way to growth and change and true freedom, really. Because perfectionism is not freedom. We're really enslaved to it just as much as with an eating disorder, and the 2 can definitely go hand in hand with a lot of people, but, it's I don't know. I wanna live free. I know going back to talking about zeal and adventure and all of that, like, that stuff is messy. It's not perfect, but it's so much more joyful when you live that way, and, yeah, I love hearing how you're helping athletes break free from that. Because, like I said, I am not personally an athlete myself, but I know that that's definitely something I've seen people struggle with, and, my own sister is a coach in that space, and just kind of hearing more about, what those struggles are and how we can help people. And even if someone's listening now, like, I don't know, do you have any advice for, say, like, like, family of an athlete? If there's anything that might be helpful for them?
Absolutely. I think helping them recognize their value isn't that they're an athlete. Again, going back to you are a child of God, you are worthy no matter what you achieve.
Yeah.
And helping them strengthen their relationship with Christ. And if they're not in Christ, help them strengthen their relationship in faith, because that's going to give us a higher power. It's going to allow us to feel motivated and a little more grounded, and it's going to give us purpose. And so, as a family member, supporting that athlete and whatever they're going through, helping them understand that they are loved, they're heard, and they're supported. And so, yeah, finding resources that could be beneficial, or helping show them messaging that may not directly align with like what they're hearing in sport. For example, a lot of time we hear like lighter is faster. That is could not be further from the truth. A lot of times that actually leads to us underfueling and getting into a really dangerous, unsafe place. And so helping them understand like being fueled, being strong is the most power that we can have in an athlete. And so there are safe ways to be in sport without overdoing it, and helping that athlete maybe find that line of like what is healthy versus unhealthy. Because those can coexist. We can be an athlete, we can be in recovery, we can be a Christian, and all of these can coexist.
Mhm. No, I like how you broke that down, and because I do know, like, I'm sure parents are obviously very involved in their kids' sports from, an early age up until, high school and even college if they play, and so just kind of knowing how to navigate that as well. Um, 'Cause I know sometimes and even I'm sure kids can feel pressure from their parents even at times to perform, that can come from those places too, and so I love that you just emphasized no like, letting your child know that that is not where you're defining their worth and how
Mm,
they perform in sports, and that even though in the moment you might be really excited or really, like, cheering them on, but that's not the only thing that's important that matters, so, yeah. So
absolutely.
okay, well, I do have one more question because I was thinking about, my sister, like I said, she's a coach at the collegiate level, and just thinking about like kind of the team culture and being able to talk about whether it's your faith or even just navigating those conversations with team members and seeing like, hey, am I the only one struggling with this? And I know we talked about that earlier of like, do you feel alone? What would you say in terms of like tips for building that team culture, not being afraid to maybe like talk to your teammates about some things you might be struggling with, or maybe things you might see that looks like maybe they're struggling with too.
Absolutely. I love that question. And it goes back to like how do families support coaches and trainers are with our athletes sometimes more than our family members are.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
especially our teammates can be with them even more. And so I think our teammates and our coaches have such a profound impact on all of our athletes and my own like day-to-day lives. And so being able to have open communication in that space is so important to show up as who you are. So often I think in team sports, it's really easy to focus on how is our team doing? What are we achieving as a team versus how are you doing as an individual? And
Mm,
I think that's where a lot of our athletes do get lost is okay, I'm here to serve the greater team. And so I need to push myself past my limits, or I need to do more
mm,
to service the team versus, okay, maybe I need to take a rest day, or maybe I need to pull myself from the second half because I've pulled something and I am not able to compete as I should. Or maybe I'm just really struggling today and I need to take a day to care for myself. And so I think coaches and teammates can really help empower our athletes. Like they are the expert on their bodies and their own well
mm,
being, and helping them understand there's so much more than an athlete in that exact moment. This is a moment of one day. Let's look at like what is our whole life and who we are as a human in our life.
yeah.
And so helping them see that. And then I think communicating, like make sure that we're vulnerable, like ask our athletes how they're doing realistically. Like, let's talk with our teammates. In private practice and even in treatment facility settings, I would see all the time our athletes say, like, well, no one else at my school struggles with this, or no one else on my team struggles this, very well knowing that I have multiple individuals from that same school or that same sport or that same team who are coming to see me.
Uh-huh.
And so if they're just able to say vulnerably in a setting, like I am struggling, or promote even, hey, what if we have a snack during halftime instead of having just water? That's a really big
Oh,
step
yeah.
that may support their own recovery and also multiple other people. So I think having faith to use your voice is important, and having coaches and trainers and teams support that individual need also.
It made me just think, the idea of saying, "Hey, let's have a snack at halftime." It just made me think, how safe of an environment would that create? To just like, so say, you're saying that you're being vulnerable, you're offering some ideas to a teammate that hasn't necessarily shared that they're also struggling, but then in that moment, they can feel a little more safe to say, "Wow, if I eat something too, I'm not the only one," or I'm not, "Oh no, I'm eating too much," or "This isn't gonna help my performance," because like, everyone is doing it, and not that we all need to always do what everyone is doing, but, like, building that community of safety. That's just kinda what the word that came to mind when you said that was just people should feel safe, as it with their team um, and just in general. So I think, like, that's a very practical way of opening up the conversation, right? And then giving someone else a chance, like, "Oh, maybe it is safe here to talk about this, and we can navigate it together." So I think that's great. And even just the tips for coaches too, because I can only imagine that that would be a very difficult conversation to have as a coach who might observe some behaviors that aren't necessarily healthy too, and how you would navigate that. Is there anything else, say, for coaches that you would say is a good resource if they're like, "Hey, I do feel like I have someone on my team who might be dealing," or even an individual athlete, maybe it's not a team sport, but who might be dealing with an eating disorder or disordered eating, and just how you would approach that conversation?
Absolutely. So I would never go into a conversation with assumptions. I would go
Mm,
into it with curiosity. So,
okay.
hey, share with me a little bit. I've noticed this going on. Like, can you share with me? Maybe that's not the case, but I've witnessed this. Or, hey, like, how can I better support you? And just allowing, they may not feel comfortable asking for support, but if you are able to notice and offer support, it may be a little bit easier for them.
Mm,
Um, I am always happy to be a resource as well, like to get you plugged in with other resources in your community or to give some education or support. There is on the National Eating Disorder Association website a parents guidebook, and then there's also one for trainers and coaches.
Oh, great.
So that's a really good resource. Both of those are great resources. They're free and downloadable, but it kind of talks about like what are signs and symptoms of an athlete struggling with an eating disorder and or outside of sport. For the parent handbook, what does
Uh,
that look like for eating disorder recovery? So both of those I would say are great resources.
mhm.
um, and then just being there to be an ear. Our coaches, like I said, can be that first line, so just say something. It doesn't hurt to say something. If you're concerned, bring it up. But bringing it up with compassion and curiosity is going to be
Mm,
really important.
I like that compassion and curiosity. I think that can carry over to any situation where you might can think someone could be struggling and you're just really not sure, like, not making those assumptions like you said, because we don't know. I mean, there who knows, there could be other things at play. But yeah, coming at it not to be accusatory in any way, but making sure that they feel safe and heard and welcome to share and get that support. And thank you for the resources as well. I will definitely link those in the show notes for anyone who was listening, like, "Oh, I need to access those." We'll make sure they're linked. So, um yeah, this has been so helpful. I feel like for anyone who was listening who is in the athlete space or a coach or even anyone who's not, like we talked about perfectionism and just kind of our identities and what God says about us versus the lies that we might hear from the people around us or society. So thank you so much, Mary Lauren. And I'd like to make sure, is there anything else that you want to add that maybe we didn't touch on or any final encouragement?
I just say, reminding anybody who's listening, healing is possible, recovery is possible. And it's good to be imperfect. That's where we're really able to make progress. That's where we're able to connect. And just making sure, like, again, if you're a Christian or you're not, finding some connection to faith so that you feel like you have purpose. And that is going to allow us to really show up and to give us motivation for each day. And I think persistence is something that's so important. So instead of that perfectionism, maybe showing up with persistence could be another way to kind of restructure that. Everybody is worthy of healing. So please, if you're struggling, make sure to reach out. Or even if you feel like you're somewhat struggling, but you're not struggling enough, you are still worthy of help, and you can show up just as you are.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely um different levels of what that struggle looks like, but, none of it's free, right? None of it's freedom, I should say, to be anywhere on that spectrum. So, yeah, appreciate those final encouragements, and I wanna make sure that the people listening have a chance to connect with you if they want to, whether that's work with you or, just kind of learn more. How can people do that?
Yes, they're welcome to reach out to me in whatever form feels most comfortable for them. So, through my website, which I can link, but it's at www.nutritiondiscovered.com, through my email, if you feel more comfortable calling. I know a lot of our teenagers feel most comfortable sending a text before we
Mhm.
get connected. So, truly, whatever feels the safest and most comfortable to you, please reach out in any way you feel is best. We do also have an Instagram account. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, I'm happy to link that, Nutrition Discovered. And we do also offer free consultations. So if anybody is wondering how maybe nutrition would look for their athlete or to for recovery or just want to learn about new resources, I am more than happy to connect with anybody. So feel free to reach out.
That's great. And yes, I will make sure all of that is linked in the show notes. Your website, Instagram, how people can connect with you. All of it will be there. So check that out if you're listening and you want to learn more. And just thank you again, Mary Lauren. Like, I'm just so thankful to have this conversation. Like I said, this topic we've not really addressed on the podcast before, and I really felt God was just wanting me to find someone who could talk more about sports and athletics and eating disorders and the challenges there that are very unique. So I'm just so grateful that God connected us the way He did, and that we were able to have this conversation today. So very grateful.
Absolutely. Well, I'm so thrilled that we connected as well. So thank you for having me.
Hey there, it's Jayme again, and you made it to the end of this episode of the Recover with God podcast. I pray that God is speaking to your heart right now and that you go on with your day feeling less alone. If you haven't already, I hope you hit that follow button to subscribe and receive notifications for future episodes. And did you know that if you leave a quick rating or review, you can help more people find this podcast too? God designed us for community, so follow along and help others do the same to feel less alone together. I hope you tune in next time, and until then, you can always catch up on any past podcasts you might have missed. P.S. I'm cheering for you.